So you were at the other side for about 2 years, you'd say, 71 to 73 or so, right? Almost 3 years?
I think it was 74, but we also, Jolene and I also moved to New York, to San Francisco for 6 months.
Oh, is
so
in
we
the
were
middle of all
gone
this?
in the middle of all of this.
Okay.
But then we got there and it was boring as hell, and trying to walk on those fucking hills with the 9-inch platforms wasn't going to work. They had the cabaret there, but it was mostly Asian, and it was weird. And you know, it wasn't. And then the hippies were gone, so and we lived right near Haight. We used to do a lot of shoplifting. We'd go into a place and just pick up a table and walk out. It was easy as hell, much easier than Boston, because everybody mopped. Everybody mopped. I used to have a fur coat, and it had gathered sleeves, so I used to go into the common market, and I would wrap pants around it, shirts, everything come out, and we'd have layers, and all of us mopped. In fact, I just stopped last year when Food Master closed. I was still getting food. Now they're gone, and I'm not going to do it at Stop and Shop.
Yeah, they might have more security there, right? So somewhere along the way, you decided to move to New York.
We were all outlaws.
Yeah.
The early gay life was being an outlaw.
Yeah.
And that changed quickly after that, and it was never the same after that.
But, I mean, well, that's another thing, too. I mean, do you have there's a certain nostalgia for that period, but is it, I always have this tug of war about assimilation and what it's cost us in terms of our uniqueness and our that kind of thing. I mean, would you have any thoughts about, like, the more accepted we became? We don't want to go back to the days where we were getting beaten up and being thrown in the paddy wagons and being forced to switch partners when the cops came to, dance with a woman instead of a guy. You would go back.
I'd go back because I miss that sense of community. I miss my family, and once we became accepted, that family wasn't needed anymore, and it changed. And
nothing's taken its place as far as you can.
I think that we were much more creative. I think we had to be creative because we didn't have any money. We were all kids. We had to make, like I said, the drag queens would make their outfits out of anything that was available.
Right.
And we would do that. We would take our clothes and we'd cut them up. We would we'd do whatever we had to do. And I think that the creativity, I think everything is much more deadened now. I think that people, I'm totally a stranger in a strange land today. I've kept myself to some degree that person that I was then. Well, I came back to that. I didn't stay myself. I've changed a lot over the years, but I held on to that Bobby Busnach, which is why I'm now Bobby Busnach again and stuff. Made peace with all of that. Gotta get out of the sun.
Yeah. Should we try to move a little bit? Yeah. Okay.
But I think that today, I think everybody it's not about individuality. Then it was very much about being an individual. And today it's about being like everybody else.
Well, there was conformity then, though, which, in terms of like the leather scene and with like the work boots and all that stuff. There were costumes and clones.
That's when it started changing.
Yeah.
And the clones and all of that stuff started. Before then, it was very interchangeable. You'd go and drag it. I never did, but a lot of my friends, they'd end up in drag one night. It was no big deal. It was just like part of life, and we were in touch with our feminine side and our masculine side, and this was all part of the 60s still.
Yeah.
That changed, and it wasn't acceptable anymore. Either you were this way or you were this way. Even in the gay life, it wasn't like that originally. Originally, you were accepted for whatever you were. You don't see sissies anymore. You don't see that anymore because it's all right in front of you the way you're supposed to be. We didn't have the internet. We didn't have MTV. We didn't have any of that shit in the old days. And if you came from a different city, a different place, you were different. It's not like that anymore. Everybody's basically the same now. Mm-hmm. And to be gay now is really intensely, you have to be like everybody else or you're not accepted. In the old days you would be accepted no matter what you were. If you were gay, you were part of the crowd because you had to be because no one else wanted you.
And you didn't. Now you mentioned the 1270, but you didn't go to too many other bars other than the other side. That was really
1270. Ended up at 1270 a lot.
Yeah.
I ended up at. I loved Cabaret.
Yeah, I don't know a lot about Cabaret.
Nobody does. Cabaret was short-lived. There was a chain of them. There was one in San Francisco. And then they opened up one here, which was on Lansdowne, where 9 Lansdowne ended up. At 9 Lansdowne. Yeah. It used to be the Tea Party in the hippie days, where Big Brother and the Holding Company and all of them went.
Right.
And actually, they still had that psychedelic lighting on the walls when it opened up as Cabaret.
Right.
But when Cabaret opened up, it was very much a glitter glam kind of thing, which is what I was really. I had my silver leather midi coat.
And was it a discotheque or was it live performances?
It was discotheque. I don't remember if they had. They should have had. It was huge.
With a name like Cabaret, I thought it was more. It had maybe actual performers.
They probably did, but we didn't. Who would have performed in those days? There was no Donna Summer yet.
Right.
Later in New York, we saw all of them all the time.
Right.
Everywhere, but the other side, they would have a review once in a while, but nobody ever came in and sang, or no groups or anything like that. They would put on reviews. They would put on. I think they put on big. Sweet Charity once or something, the Queens.
And what year was Cabaret in operation? What do you remember?
Cabaret had to be about 73, 74.
Okay.
So it was
only
changing.
Around for about
It was short-lived.
Yeah. A year, you'd say, maybe?
If that. Maybe. Okay. It was huge, so they would have had to really fill it, and there were always open. It was weird. It was always open spaces. But Cabaret was really fun.
But you liked it, yeah.
I liked it there. That was actually just before the Hustle came in, I think. No, the Hustle was later. That was 1270. I'd come back to, and I danced with Donnie Ward.
So you basically moved to New York in 74. So it was right around this time that you decided.
October 74. We moved to San Francisco, and then we came back, and we got an apartment up on the hill, up over near the hospitals and stuff, Hillside Ave. We lived up there, and Jolene we massaged. We did massages. We used to put ads in the Boston Phoenix and the Real paper for massages, and they were sex.
Right.
But we would massage, and that's how we saved up the money to move to New York. When I came, the first time I went to New York was with some guy that I had a crush on. I actually had a threesome with him and his boyfriend. And the boyfriend was uncircumcised, and I thought, up until just recently, I realized, wait a minute, his dick wasn't cut off, it was uncircumcised. I didn't realize it at the time, because he had this really weird dick. But his boyfriend, who I really liked, took me to New York. We went to New York for some reason, and the first bar I went to was the Round Table, which is all these drag queens, which ended up being right next to Hollywood, which was a Do the Hustle bar that I ended up being at all the time when I moved there in 74. But so I went there the first time, and then I went again with Donnie Ward, and we stayed in the East Village before it was all gentrified and stuff, when it was still scary. And we went to the Gallery. The Gallery was an after-hours bar. Nicky Ciano was the DJ. This was the first Gallery. It was on 20th Street. I was 17 by then, or 16, I don't know. And this fucking place, they had acid in the punch. They had little speakers all over the place. I had never heard anybody play like Nicky Ciano. And to be so fucked up on acid, it was like being in a whole other planet.
So you had not heard anything like that in Boston?
Nothing, and the people was mostly all black, which
in Boston
was not the case in Boston. The early gay life was very white, segregated. Yeah. There were a couple of black, Donnie Ward, George Best, Precious, Ozzy, but they were, especially Donnie Ward, they were kind of white. They were safe. Yeah. They weren't, heavily black. Right. And I thought I was unprejudiced, but then all of a sudden I realized, wait, but I'm not sleeping with black men. Why? Right. It's changed in New York. Right. So that was another aspect. There were no black people. Very few black people in the gay bars in the early, and still probably. I don't know. I don't go into them anymore. But so New York was very different. Yeah. Gallery was mostly black and Hispanic, which is the life I ended up taking over when I went to New York. These are the people that I ended up, and when I started liking sex, right, I got away from the little white boys. So I went there, and I was just like, Well, music was always really important to me. My mother would always be playing on the stereo Dionne Warwick, James Brown, always. So, and she loved her radio, WILD. She used to always listen to, and so we used to talk about when I grew up I was going to be a DJ. So music was always really important to me. And going to the garage and hearing stuff I had never heard before, like Dream World by Don Downing and MFSB, Love Is the Message. The first time I heard it was there, and he had the jet takeoff in the middle of it, and so right away I said this, and the whole atmosphere of New York was so. I think we also went down to the Limelight the first time, the first Limelight down in the Village, which was all Latino, and just it wasn't wild like the other side, but it was it was New York, and it really was. It made Boston look so provincial.
Yeah. And
I decided right there we were moving to New York. So within 6 months we saved up enough money. The other side was dying. 1270 was becoming more popular. I think probably the bars were our lives. This is how we communicated. This is how we found partners. This is how we saw our friends. I mean, they hung out at my house too. There's a lot of photos on I have tons of great photos. One of them is Sunday afternoon, where Stella is falling off. Actually, wasn't Stella's like this, all fucked up on Downs, and Dawn is falling off the couch. And this is like 12 noon on a Sunday.
And this is on the other side page, or the.
It might be on both, okay. Mine and there.
Yeah, I actually tagged the other side page today on Facebook when I said I was coming in to talk to you.
Oh, was that the first time you saw it was today?
Oh, no, I've liked the other side page for a couple of years now.
Oh, good.
I think it's been a long time since I would check in frequently. But I tagged it today when I told people I was coming to talk to you because I would like more people to actually check out the page as well.
Great.
But I mean, I think how are we doing on time? I think we wanted to talk mostly about the Boston era, right? So you went to New York. I would like to talk to you about that at some point, just on a personal level.
It was completely different from Boston.
Sure.
I mean, completely. First of all, I mean, it was much more expensive.
Yeah.
And we didn't have all the friends we had in Boston to look out for one another and stuff. Although a lot of them ended up moving to New York. But then the other thing we don't is the deaths in the other side. They started really early. I mean, people died regularly. They were murdered, they committed suicide, they OD'd. They're all dead. Most of them are all dead. That's why anybody I meet from the other side days who's a survivor is accepted in my book. I mean, there was Dead Jerry, who they ended up, they think it was Bobby Ray. Bobby Ray was this really ugly, long-haired, stringy long-haired, white pock-faced. He was like, I think in his 30s already, but he was friends with Paul Walsh, a lot of the Queens. They lived on the Hill, but he was a drug dealer. And I'm pretty sure that Jerry owed him some money, and Jerry was found in the Fenway, head down in a sewer. Then there was blonde Brad, who was beautiful, who went and dragged his Gilda once in a great while, but he was very muscular and beautiful blonde hair. He ended up being murdered. Bobby Ray ended up being murdered. Naomi died of AIDS, one of the queens. Colette was murdered. I mean, every day you would go to the other side, somebody was dead. So as much as it was a safe kind of community for us, it was also really sad, and really still very unsafe.
So we like to romanticize the past a little bit, but there was that whole other side of it where there was
it was dangerous.
Yeah.
It was a dangerous life then. But because of that danger, we were all the more close. We were really family, and we really looked out for another, and I miss that, and I've always missed that. I've never found that again after gayness started becoming acceptable. Yeah. Once it started becoming acceptable, everything, gay people weren't as at one time, gay people were the most, and this is one of the reasons why I walked away from the whole gay life for a long time. Gay people were the most open-minded, and that changed. And today it's very, very different. If you're not like, it's very much into cliques now, which started then. And you got to be like them or you're not accepted. So that's why I stepped out of it for a long time. But the debts were a big part of it. And then after then, almost everybody is gone.
Yeah.
So when we find somebody new on the other side, we're thrilled.
Yeah.
Somebody that survived.